I'm excited about this one. Welcome to the Concussion Discussion Podcast, Episode 4. I'm your host, Austin Sherlock. Of course, you guys know that by now. I'm so pumped about this one because the fights were crazy. They were insane in Glendale on Saturday night. Then I've got Jon Fitch on the podcast. You might know him, fought George St. Pierre. He was in the UFC for, a minute, I guess. When I say a minute, I mean a real long time. He's a stud. Also trains with the stars in Khabib and DC. So super excited about that. And then we're going to get into UFC Atlantic City, which I'm going to be at. My girlfriend and I are going to be at that fight. We've got floor tickets. So best tickets I've ever had in my life. So I'm super pumped about that. So a lot of content, a lot of stuff to cover. I cannot wait to get into this with you guys. I seriously cannot wait. As of late, I've got so much support, for the podcast and the content. I got people texting me, messaging me. Obviously have Jon Fitch calling in, which is a huge win for the podcast. So I hope you guys enjoy what I bring to your ears. So let's break down this UFC on Fox 29 in Glendale, Arizona. Look, man, before I get into these fights, this shit was stacked from beginning to end. I actually predicted that this would be the best fight card of the year. And I think even when you're talking about the pay-per-views that have happened thus far, I think this was the best fight card of the year, even though it was free on Fox. So I predicted all these fights, if you guys follow the page on Instagram. So there were 14 fights, and it was hilarious, man. Like, the fighters weighed in on Friday the 13th. There were 14 fights, which is a lot of fights for the UFC on one card. And I'm thinking Friday the 13th, we're going to miss some fights. We're going to lose some fights because of weight cuts, health issues, you name it, right? All 14 fighters come in on weight. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be crazy. So last week, my predictions were there were 9 fights and I went 7-2. This weekend I went 11-3. So I'm definitely pumped about that. And I'm trying, like I said in the last podcast, I'm trying to make you guys some money. So if you listen and you bet or you just talk to your friends about fighting, let them know. Steal everything that I'm saying and take it as your own. I don't care. I did well again this week, so I'm pretty happy about that. And what I'm more happy about was this whole card just coming to fruition like it should. So I'm going to start off with the main event. It's Dustin Poirier versus Justin Gaethje. The first 2 rounds, I definitely had Poirier winning. The third round had some adversity as far as, there were some question marks there. There were some eye pokes, some nefarious activities going on. I don't think any of it was on purpose, but, it was a really good fight. I really think this was a fight of the year candidate. So what happened was Dustin Poirier got it done via 4th round TKO, and that's exactly what I said to the T. What I said on the last podcast, I said Dustin Poirier gets it done via 4th round TKO, and that's exactly what happened. 33 seconds, I believe, into the 4th round, Dustin Poirier finishes Justin Gaethje. And Justin Gaethje looked great. Look, Justin Gaethje's a savage. He hurt Dustin. He was landing crazy leg kicks, which is what he does. But at the end, like I said in the last podcast, Dustin Poirier was just a little bit too technical. Justin holds his hands up real high. And, when he's blocking, leaves his body exposed. And that's what led to a lot of body punches. And, Dustin Poirier was just a little bit too much. So Dustin Poirier gets it done via 4th round TKO as predicted. Looked great though, and there's a lot that can come from that. It's weird because the lightweight title picture didn't make any sense 2 weeks ago because there weren't any clear contenders. And now there's too many clear contenders. So before you had Khabib versus Tony, and then, Connor's kind of been on the wayside. So it was like the winner of that fight what was originally supposed to be scheduled, Khabib versus Tony. That would be the clear-cut champ, and then the winner of that, the champion, would fight Conor, right? But because of all the drama, the bringing in Max Holloway, talking about bringing in, and then, they brought in Ali Quinta. It just doesn't, there's a lot of, it's so muddy right now, right? But now you make it more muddy because you've got the number 5 guy who hasn't lost in 4 fights in Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje, who is just a savage and puts on fight of the year level fights every single time that he fights. I gotta say, unless Conor comes back soon, and that's the only way you do that Conor versus Khabib fight, you have to do it soon. You have to do it very soon. But if Conor doesn't come back by, I'll give him till October, you have to give Dustin Poirier that title shot. I think he's still in the queue for that title fight. But Dustin Poirier, man, he looked great. Justin Gaethje looked great too, man. But he just went out there and he went out on his shield. That's just what he does. He takes shots and he gives them back. At this level, I don't think it works. All right, moving to the co-main event, you had Carlos Condit versus Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Fight went basically as I expected. I think Condit's done. Unfortunately, I love Carlos Condit, but I think he's done, man. He's just, when he's in the octagon, you can just tell he gets hit, doesn't really throw back, anything very much, and just kind of gets in a shell, and he's not that active. But Alex Oliveira came in on, I think it was 6 days. 6 days notice. And comes in and round 2 finishes Condit via choke, which I predicted as well. Then you had Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori. Look, this fight went a split decision, and whoever the fuck gave Marvin Vettori 1 round is full of shit. Look, I gave Marvin Vettori the 3rd round because of the takedown, and he was just more active on top. But the first 2 rounds were very clearly Israel Adesanya's rounds. A lot of people are comparing Adesanya to Jon Jones, which he doesn't like, but I can understand it because of his length, just the way that he fights. But he's a stud, man, and don't count out Marvin Vettori at all. He lost to a very game Israel Adesanya. I think Israel Adesanya is 174-5 in his kickboxing career. So obviously he's no slouch on the feet. I think that he definitely has some work to do when he's on the ground. Some of the stuff that I was watching just looked very amateur, and he actually said after the fight that he knew better, but he was just too in the moment. So that should have been a unanimous decision in my mind, Israel Adesanya. But can't wait to see both those guys fight. Again, great fighters. Ooh, my girl, Michelle Waterson, karate hottie, versus Courtney Casey. So Michelle Waterson gets a split decision versus Courtney Casey, and I actually agree with this split decision. It was a very close fight. I wouldn't have been too upset if it went either way. First round, Courtney Casey comes in and just, kind of puts it on Michelle Waterson, who is undersized, as I've stated before, for that weight class. She's a natural atom weight, but the UFC does not have that 105-pound weight class. So, she's fighting at 115 pounds against some big girls. Courtney Casey is a big strawweight. Courtney Casey starts putting it on her in the first round. Then the second and third round, I think that Michelle Waterson, in the clinch, she was getting some good takedowns and then just maintaining top control. Courtney Casey, though, her submissions look great. They were quick. They came out of nowhere. But, Michelle Waterson found a way to fight out of those submission attempts and regain that top control and just kind of put it on her, looking at the stats. And I'm not a huge, statistician, but you look at the total strikes, 77 for Michelle Waterson, 64 for Courtney Casey. Strike percentage, 74% for Michelle Waterson, 50% for Courtney Casey. Significant strikes, 61 for Michelle Waterson, 36 for Courtney Casey. Then you go to the takedown number, 3 takedowns for Michelle Waterson, no takedowns for Courtney Casey. So you have to be careful about these numbers, but in this case, I will say that it painted a clear picture for the winner of this fight, which I thought was Michelle Waterson. So now let's get into the part of the podcast that I'm most excited about. There's a man by the name of Jon Fitch that you may know. He's a household name. He's fought in the UFC, the World Series of Fighting, and now most recently signed with Bellator. He's fighting on Bellator 199 in San Jose against Paul Daly. John called in. We talk about a little bit about his fight, but we talk more about the behind-the-scenes issues that happen. Anyone can give their prediction on a fight. That's the easy part. But what us fans don't get a lot of feedback or a lot of exposure to is what happens behind the scenes of the fight game. So right now I'm being joined on the podcast by Bellator fighter Jon Fitch. John, thanks for calling in, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
Hey, so, a few hot topics to talk about really is you signing with Bellator. I believe you guys announced it, about a month ago? Is that correct?
So yeah, about that.
So I have to ask, and I've heard different perspectives on this. You've been through the ringer with almost every major organization there is in the business. So, obviously UFC, World Series of Fighting, now Bellator. What's really the difference that you take away as far as like the production, the personalities? What does that look like, and what's the perspective from your end personally?
Yeah, I think Scott's a lot easier to work with. Treats these fighters, as far as I know, with a lot more respect. I don't hear too many guys complaining about Scott at all. The only complaints I've heard are guys not happy with being active enough, which is kind of an industry-wide complaint.
Right.
But yeah, there's just a level of respect, I think, that doesn't exist, from the UFC, I think, to a lot of their athletes. You feel more like cattle than a professional athlete.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that a lot with a lot of guys moving from UFC to Bellator or whatever it is. But I have heard that. So, it's good to hear, though. I mean, being with Bellator's had some huge signings lately. Rory then signing you, and you've got the Paul Dalys who you're fighting, and they're definitely stepping their game up. So that's really good to see. I guess that leads me right into your fight. So you've got to fight Paul Daly, Bellator 199 in San Jose. Your thoughts on Paul as a fighter and how you see that fight going?
He comes to knock people out. He throws big bombs, and he's not much of a wrestler. So
right, yeah,
that works to my my advantage. And I'm looking forward to the fight. I think it's gonna be a good fight. I do well with guys who are coming at you and coming after you. So I'm looking forward to getting the opportunity to fight in front of my home crowd, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity.
Right. And dude, I'll say that Paul Daly, man, he's a stud, and I feel like some guys kind of sleep on him a little bit. That Lorenz Larkin fight, I was sleeping on Paul Daly. I was thinking Lorenz is going to go out there and handle him. Boy, was I wrong. Paul Daly, as your first fight in Bellator, they just kind of fed you to the wolves. But, I guess it makes sense, both of you guys having a long, history in the sport. So I'm really looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Let's talk about, because you're an AKA guy and, some absolute studs out of AKA. Obviously, the resume speaks for itself. And I've heard this on other, media outlets, but I have to ask because I want to hear it from someone right there at the camp. How unreal is Khabib in practice?
He's a stud, man. He really is. He's got really great wrestling. He's ridiculously strong. So good, really strong hips, and when he grabs the hold, you don't think that he's a 155 pounder at all.
I've heard.
Yeah, like I wouldn't. He feels more like a 185 pounder when you start tussling with him.
See, I've heard that, and it's like, it doesn't take a genius to know that Khabib's a stud. All of you guys are insane grapplers, so to hear Khabib is doing just fine with you bigger guys, it's kind of like, oh shit, it's crazy to hear,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean he's a stud, man. That's for sure.
So obviously, with your history with the UFC, there were some issues there, but do you still regularly watch, fights regardless of the banner that they're under?
I kind of took a break from watching a lot of fights.
Really?
I've never really been a spectator of anything. I like doing stuff. I like being involved in stuff. I'm not somebody who really wants to sit down and watch things. I think when I started having a little troubles with the UFC and started to realize that MMA wasn't really a sport, that it was just another form of pro wrestling, that there was no merit system to get to the top. I kind of lost interest because I like that idea of people climbing the ladder and seeing who's ranked where and where they're going. And the whole idea of arbitrary rankings and arbitrary weight classes was just a big turnoff to me.
Right.
In recent months, so far this year and a little bit last year, I started trying to get more back into watching fights, especially, teammates and people I know's fights. Mm-hmm. And, I like what Bellator has been doing. So I've been trying to watch a lot more of their fights. And a part of the problem too, is I cut the cable cord about 10 years ago.
Wow.
So I just don't have access.
Right.
Unless I find, if I just, I have to drive to a bar, or I have to go and, find an illegal upload online or something in order to watch the fight. So
it's a
if you don't have cable, if you're not paying the $120 a month just to have cable in your house, it can be a pain. And I don't really want to pay into the fight pass, because I just think it's you're paying the beast, and that money isn't getting distributed correctly to the fighters. So why put money into that? So yeah, I'm focusing a lot of my spectator energy that I have more towards Bellator.
What about this fighter union? You're talking about the money not being distributed, and I know last year around this time there was a lot of talk with this fighter union stuff. Kane was involved. I know they asked Brendan Schaub to be involved. There were a bunch of high-level guys to get this fighter union thing started, because that's what every other major sport has. Were you ever involved, or?
I've been a member of the Mixed Martial Arts Fighters Association for a while, and the Fighters Association's been around for over a decade. Mm-hmm. And we don't get any press because we're a threat to the status quo, and nobody wants to talk about us or give us any props because they like the monopoly that's been created. A lot of people think that the only way for MMA to survive as a sport is if the UFC is a monopoly and controls everything.
Right.
I think that's very, very delusional. I think that the sport is popular and people will love the sport, and the fighters are what make the sport. So with the promotion, with the one promotion or not, I think the sport's going to be popular. And I think a lot of people are just afraid of the unknown. So they're afraid to actually take action and support what needs to be supported. What we really need is the Muhammad Ali Act to be enacted for mixed martial arts. That will solidify our positions as independent contractors.
Right.
And it will allow us to determine what our market value is, rather than just being told what we're being paid by the promoter. Being able to look at the books and see what the promoters are making off our backs gives us negotiating power to ask for what we're actually being paid for. Cross promotion and the ability to be signed by a small promoter when you're just starting off is very beneficial to low level guys, because those promoters are going to put out more money to keep the guys they think are going to turn into champions later. Meaning they'll pay for your health care. They'll pay for, your training. They'll pay for coaches. They'll pay for what you need in order to get that return on investment back when they they turn you into a champion, and they don't really know who's going to be a champion. So they're going to spread that money around. So the lower level guys are going to benefit a great deal. What happens now is lower level guys, they fight for a promoter until they win a number of fights, and they can leave that promotion and go to another promoter. So they have to work their way up the promotions instead of finding one promoter to stand by them from the beginning till the end. And the idea that a lot of people they want to jump into this union idea, but a union under one promoter isn't going to work, because you can't enforce it. You have no leverage in order to get what you want. You can't strike, because they'll just take your ranking away from you and give it to somebody else. They'll strip your
rankings
belt.
are a joke anyways, you know?
Yeah, so they're arbitrary. So if you say, hey, I'm not going to fight because I want more pay, they'll be like, okay, well, we're not going to give you a bout agreement. And then they'll wait until you're out of money, and then you'll be like, okay, well, never mind. I'll fight anyways because I need money.
Right.
And
so you're stuck. You can't do anything.
You cannot put pressure on them. You could have the entire lineup sign with this union, and they will just find a whole new lineup of people. There are plenty of people who will fight for free. They don't care. And if you can give a ranking to anybody, and you could create a title out of nowhere, there is zero leverage. So that's the importance of the Ali Act. You really need the Ali Act, because then there is a legal backstop that if they break those rules, you can actually sue them. You can actually force their hand with what they're doing. The other thing that is a big mistake that they're doing with this one entity or one promotion union is they lose the right to sue. They cannot sue the promoter for collusion for suppression of wages, because there's only one promoter and you cannot collude with yourself. There's been talk about how other sports used a collective bargaining agreement to get paid more, but they're failing to realize that the only reason that collective bargaining agreement worked was because that those athletes had the ability to sue, because there was multiple team owners in those sports. Like baseball, there's multiple equal owners in baseball. And when the baseball players had the right to sue, they could sue them for collusion to suppress wages. Then they had the backbone, they had the backstop to actually push them up against, to force their hand and make them pay them more. But that does not exist in MMA. There's only one owner. They're going to solidify a union in the UFC. Those guys will never be able to negotiate or be paid more than 25%. They're tying a rope around the future athletes of the sport. It'll take another 20 years before guys figure out what's going on and push back and try to change things and get a free market again.
So can you just go into really quick, you brought it up earlier, the employee versus independent contractor. Can you explain what would change?
So the way fighting and prize fighting is supposed to work, each fighter is a business. Each fighter is an independently owned business, an independent contractor. All right. So the fighters, when they come together and want to put a fight together, they find a promoter to pay the promoter to put the show on. That's how it's supposed to work.
Right.
And then the fighters are supposed to give the promoter a cut of the money, of the revenue. But that's been turned upside down. And now it's the promoter who controls everything. And they're trying to run it like pro wrestling promotion, which is not a real sport. It's a production. That's a television show. It's a movie. You cast roles and you write the dialogue and you write what you want to happen. That's not a sport. So in order to have a real sport, we have to turn things back the way they're supposed to be. Fighters are supposed to be in charge. Fighters are the ones who pick the fights. Fighters are the ones who are supposed to hire the promotion to promote the fight and to give them a cut. The things that have been happening today are inverse of what they're supposed to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for clearing that up. So you've been doing this for a while. How many more do you think you have in you? Because you look at a guy like Justin Gaethje, who just fought on Saturday. He said, I probably got 5 more left in me, and then, that's probably it. So how much more do you have left in you, if you can even project that?
I mean, I don't fight the types of fights that got Justin Gaethje and a lot of other guys fight.
Sure.
my goal is to do damage without taking damage.
Yep.
Like I'm not supposed to get beat up in the process of beating someone up. That's
Right.
not smart. And you really don't get paid that much more to do that. The way things are set up.
Get a bonus or something, but those are
that bonus,
blowing your hair back.
Exactly. That bonus isn't, you end your career 5 to 10 years early. Like, you're not making that money up because you had a crazy great fight. That's not happening. Mm-hmm. It's not like boxing where you're going to get a big percentage of your next fight because you had some crazy brawl. That doesn't happen. So like you're talking about getting pennies for losing brain cells, and that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, when you have a family, that's obviously an easy choice,
When you have to provide for your family and yourself for the rest of your life. I mean, your average UFC career is 1 year. Your average marquee main event fighters in the UFC average 2.5 years.
Wow,
that's nothing. Yeah, so like, how are these guys going to put in the time to be somebody and make money at this, and then they've spent a good portion of their younger life that they should have been working another job. If they were working another job, they'd be collecting pension and putting experience towards a career that they're going to buy houses and be able to raise their family by. But that's taken away, and then you get guys who are going to be in their mid to late 30s who are going back into the job market, starting over and working where they should have been when they were 20 years old.
Yep.
You got to start all over. You're starting at the bottom, and you're going to have probably less physical ability and possibly less mental ability. You're going to sacrifice your body and your brain in this sport. So if you're just destroying yourself for nothing and destroying your future, it doesn't really make any sense to me.
I completely agree.
As far as how much I have left in me, I'm taking it one fight at a time, and I'm enjoying myself. I'm still having fun. And, I think I can be a good example to other people and tell my stories and give my lessons and hopefully help not just, future fighters out, but just regular people who are looking for some inspiration or looking for a path. There's a lot of depressed people out these days. A lot of people who are looking for direction. And maybe I can help in a little tiny way.
I love that, man. That's awesome. So one more thing, what's your social media? I know you have Fitch Smash LLC. What else are you involved with so the listeners can follow what you're doing?
The biggest thing is go to my website, jonfitch.net, and you should be able to find all my other stuff there. Other than that, I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Jon Fitch, and I'm trying to create a community there where I'm, basically. We have a little saying, try to be better every day, make yourself better every day. Mm-hmm. So we're working on little things there. I'm sharing a blog, about my past journals and past stuff I've done. So I've got a lot going on, so people can check out my content and give some support. I do a daily live stream at 10 a.m. I call it a shake break. It's where I have it's the time of day I have my protein shake. So, I started figuring if I'm sitting here drinking a shake anyways, I might as well live stream and talk to people.
Right on.
So I'm doing that pretty much every day. But yeah, I'm just taking everything day by day, having fun.
All right, Jon. Well, I know you have a family and you're busy, so I will get you out of here on that. Check out Jon Fitch. Bellator 199, he's fighting Paul Daly. I'm sure it's going to be a great fight. I'd love to do this again, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's good talking to you.
All right, brother. You too. Bye.
Bye.
So there was, ladies and gentlemen, Jon Fitch calling into the concussion discussion. And, man, like I said, he's such a nice guy. You couldn't ask for a better guy. And for him to get in depth the way that he did about the behind-the-scenes issues with the fighter union that is still, it seems like it's in shambles a little bit. Thanks to Jon for just being so honest and upfront. That's the kind of exposure and content that I want for the podcast. Okay, let's get into a few current events. Just a few things to get into after UFC Glendale. So I talked about this on episode 3 when I was talking about UFC Glendale, but today, Carlos Condit, said, maybe my time has passed, saying that it's his time to quit. I said that I thought Carlos Condit was done, right? He can fight unranked guys and, unknown guys, but that does nothing for his legacy. So obviously Carlos Condit is going to fight well-known guys, and he came up short for a second time in a row off a long layoff. Look, I've said it time and time again. This sport is all about runs. You have your run, then you lose a few. You may win one in between there, one or two, but if your run's over, it's over. But what's different about this is, in mixed martial arts, no one really goes out on top. You don't see guys defending their title for the fourth time and then saying, all right, I defended my title, I'm getting out, or ending on a win. I feel like 85% of the time these guys lose, and then finally just disappear off into the sunset, which is a bummer. It's good to see them stop when it's their time to stop, but I feel like they prolong that by thinking that their passion for the sport is enough to keep them relevant when their body and their brain is saying otherwise. So I actually like that Carlos Condit, at a fairly young age, is saying, you know what, I think my time is done. So shout out to Carlos Condit. I do hope he calls it quits. Could he win a few more in the UFC? Definitely. But, personally, what's it do for his legacy? He's fought the best of the best. He's fought Rory McDonald. He's fought Robbie Lawler. He's fought everyone. He's fought George St. Pierre. He's got nothing left to prove. So good on him for at least acknowledging that. And, this is a sport to where if you have one foot out the door, where if that idea even creeps in your mind that this is it, yeah, it's time to quit. And Carlos Condit is a very, very smart man, and I think he knows that. And then just real quick, Firas Zahabi saying that no doubt George St. Pierre is the greatest fighter of all time. This is very interesting because you've got a few guys that can make that claim. George St. Pierre is definitely one of them. John Jones is definitely one of them. Anderson Silva is definitely one of them. And in my mind, Demetrius Johnson is the one greatest of all time. So let me go back a little bit. Can George St. Pierre say that he is the greatest of all time? Yeah, definitely. Can his head coach, Firas Zahabi? Yeah, definitely. But let's not forget, John Jones did some crazy shit. Not in his personal life. I'm talking about in the octagon. He did some crazy shit. He was a savage. Still is a savage. Just knocked out DC last year. No one finishes DC. But then you have his personal life. Him hitting pregnant women in cars and doing coke, and most recently pissing hot for steroids. Do we know the details of that yet? Of the John Jones situation? No, because he hasn't done his USADA hearing. So we'll figure that out. But, if you account everything, I think John Jones is out of it. Then you have Anderson Silva. He's tested hot twice. But his highlight reel is crazy. For a lot of people, Anderson Silva is still the number one guy to ever do it. I disagree because he's pissed hot twice without any sort of unknowns behind it. It's very clear that he was doing some nefarious activities that definitely helped him inside the octagon. So then you say, all right, well, you just spelled out that GSP is the greatest of all time. No, because GSP had his reign during the steroid era before USADA came in. Remember that. So USADA is strict as hell. They're busting everybody. They're catching everybody with their pants down. They're trying to test your kids for steroids. They don't give a shit. Well, when you have this era of fighters that made their claim to fame to be the best of all time in the pre-USADA era, who knows what the fuck they were doing? Who knows? Look at the old Pride days, right? You have the old Dan Henderson, when Shogun, Rampage. You have all these savages. Pride put in their contracts, we do not test for steroids. They put that there. So I'm not saying GSP was on anything. I'm just saying I'm playing devil's advocate, I could be a complete moron, but if I get through high school because you aren't giving me a math test at all, ever, I might come off as a really smart fucking dude, But, who knows? In my mind, Demetrius Johnson is the best of all time. And it's going to take something very, very significant to make that man not the best of all time and change my mind. So now let's get into, oh my God, I'm going to be there. I'm so excited about this fight. Let's get into UFC Fight Night, Barbosa versus Lee, April 21st in Atlantic City. So the first fight to talk about is Corey Anderson is fighting Patrick Cummins. So Corey Anderson, ranked number 10 in the light heavyweight division, and Cummins is ranked number 11. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm biased as shit because Corey Anderson is from a town that's 3 minutes from me. And, he's also a stud. And Patrick Cummins is a stud, too. I am going to take Corey Anderson via unanimous decision. I think his wrestling probably gets it done. But it's not going to be easy at all. Patrick Cummins is a very, very, very tough dude. So that opens the FS1 prelims, which is a great fight to open up the FS1 prelims. So now we'll go to Jim Miller, Dan Hooker. I love both guys. I think Jim Miller's another one of those guys to where he's been in it too long. I don't think he's taken too much damage, but he hasn't looked good as of late. Obviously, age does affect what happens in the fight game. I will take Dan Hooker via second round TKO. Could be completely wrong, though. I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Miller submits Dan Hooker, but I will take Dan Hooker via second round TKO. This one, Aljamain Sterling versus Brett Johns. Brett Johns is a savage. Brett Johns is ranked number 14, and Aljamain Sterling number 8. I'll take Aljamain Sterling via third round knockout. Both these guys have crazy records. So Aljamain Sterling is 14-3. Brett Johns is 15-0. But, Aljamain Sterling, when you look at his record, he's fought the who's who of that, of that division in the UFC. So you really have to consider the strength of schedule, I guess is the way to put it. The level of fighters that he's fighting. And, I think Aljamain Sterling gets it done. David Branch, number 8, and Thiago Santos, number 11 in the middleweight. Jesus Christ, middleweight. David Branch used to fight at light heavyweight in World Series of Fighting. David Branch fought Luke Rockhold and landed some good shots on Rockhold, but Rockhold took him down and finished him. And Thiago Santos, I think he's on like a 4-fight winning streak, and he has like a 70% KO. So in his last fight, he beat Anthony Smith. He's a stud. I will take in that fight. I will take Santos via third round KO. TKO, something like that. Then Justin Willis facing off against Chase Sherman. Chase is a monster. Willis is he's durable as shit. The last time I saw him fight, he's durable as hell. Both guys knock people out often. Justin Willis knocking out 7 out of 10 guys, and Chase knocking out 8 out of 10 guys. Here, if you look at the weight, Willis, he's going to weigh in at probably 260, 265, just at that heavyweight limit. But their reach is the same, leg reach is the same. But here, I think that Justin Willis probably comes out and throws a lot of fire early, a lot of heavy shots that probably wear him out. I think Chase Sherman's just a little bit too, I think he's been in there too long, and I think he's just more experienced. I will take Chase Sherman via late third round KO. Also Chase Sherman, strong nickname, the Vanilla Gorilla. Gotta love that. The Vanilla Gorilla. Oh, shit. Now we're talking Frankie Edgar, Cub Swanson. So as I already talked about in episode 1, I think, Frankie Edgar versus Cub Swanson. This is the second time this fight happened. It's going to happen. And, Frankie is coming off of a huge knockout loss to Brian Ortega. I don't like how fast he's getting back in here, but that's not for me to judge. I'm a monkey behind a microphone. I'm not a fighter. I've met Frankie. He's such a nice guy. Couldn't ask for a nicer guy. So I'm concerned, about his health, man. I'm just, I care about these guys, man, because I love seeing them. And then Cub Swanson, he's a stud, man. He just signed a new deal with the UFC. So I love Cub, man, but I will say, as concerned as I am about Frankie, I think Frankie probably gets it done via unanimous decision. If it was a 5-round fight, I'd probably pick Frankie via some sort of stoppage, probably a TKO. But because it's 3 rounds and Frankie just not too long ago went through some damage, I think he plays it not safe, but a little bit more conservative than he did against Brian Ortega. But that'll be a great fight. That's a great fucking fight. And then to the main event, Edson Barboza versus Kevin Lee. So Edson Barboza trains in Jersey. He trains with Edgar and with the great Mark Henry. Mark Henry's I feel like personally the most underrated head coach in the game. Versus Kevin Lee, his last fight, Kevin Lee lost to Tony Ferguson, who was supposed to fight for the undisputed world title against Khabib Nurmagomedov. I thought Kevin Lee looked way better than a lot of people gave him credit for. This is a good fight. Edson has those, if you haven't seen when he knocked out Terry Edom with that wheel kick, that was fucking insane. But then Kevin Lee, everyone forgets this, but Kevin Lee mounted Tony Ferguson, which is a big victory. Even though he lost that fight, he mounted Tony Ferguson, was landing good shots on him. The only issue with Kevin Lee is his weight. He comes in real heavy. The fight against Tony, he had a staph infection, and 2 days before the fight, he was over 170 pounds. And obviously, when you have to weigh in at 155, that does affect your conditioning. So I hope Kevin Lee figured that out. I'm going to have Mark Henry on the show, but Mark, don't kill me. I'm going to take Kevin Lee by 4th round TKO. I know Edson's hard to get down, but I think Kevin Lee does find a way, does get a dominant position, and does put it on him. So that covers UFC on Fox 29 in Glendale, Arizona, as well as it covers UFC Fight Night, Barboza versus Lee in Atlantic City, which I will be at. I cannot wait for that. I went to UFC 220, and this card, actually, I think I'm a little bit more excited about than I was UFC 220. And now going into a few questions. Let's go to my boy Dennis. Dennis always coming in the clutch. Let's see. He says, who deserves a lightweight title shot? In what order? Who's next? GSP is not in the conversation, I feel. So yes, GSP is not in the conversation. I would agree with you there. GSP's never made 155. Everyone's kind of jumping on this train of GSP versus Khabib. GSP is losing weight. Yeah, no, let's not talk about that. He's not there yet. And then who should be next? Depends on the Conor situation. Like I said earlier, if Conor versus Khabib is going to happen, you have to do it within the next 5 months. Max. 5 months maximum. If that doesn't happen, you have to do Dustin Poirier. I mean, you can say what you want about Dustin Poirier and that no contest against Eddie Alvarez, but let's all be honest, if you watch that fight, Dustin Poirier won that fight against Eddie Alvarez, even though it was a no contest. And he beats Justin Gaethje. Dustin's just on a fucking tear right now. You got to give Justin his due. So if that Conor thing does not happen, I feel Dustin's more deserving of it. What I think actually happens, though, because of Conor's name and his star power, Conor probably gets that fight. But aside from that, do Dustin. Cody went up to TJ at the presser nicely. What do you think he said? Thanking him for the rematch? No. Cody didn't thank TJ for shit. They don't like each other at all. But I cannot wait to see that fight. I believe it's in LA UFC 227, I think. but that's going to be a great fight. What's your favorite fight of the year so far? Personally, I love Khabib versus Al because Al's will to stay in the fight is so inspiring, but Poirier versus Gaethje is hard to top. Pure violence. I get why Khabib and Al is your favorite fight of the year. I understand it, but I completely disagree with you. It was kind of a shit show of a fight. I mean, you've got the number 1 guy fighting a number 11 guy, and now Khabib's the champion. And everyone's freaking out about Khabib's, his superior striking. No, Khabib landed a jab because Al Iaquinta's hands were down trying to defend a takedown. So that left the jab open. So, look, Khabib is not a high-level striker. Not like a Conor, not like he could beat the shit out of me, but not like a Conor or not like a Tony Ferguson. So let's not put him in that same category because he landed a jab and gave Al Iaquinta what he knows. So I'm really not on that Khabib train just yet. But I would say my favorite fight of the year is definitely, easily Poirier versus Gaethje. I get why, the will of Al is inspiring, but as far as pure fight, no, it has to go to Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier. So I think that's it. Super excited about this new art. That's the logo. And talking to Jon Fitch was awesome, man. He's you couldn't ask for a greater guy. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Y'all be good to each other.